Welcome to MasterMined, the behavioral health business podcast. We go beyond the clinical to explore what it really takes to build, grow, and lead a successful behavioral health organization. Each episode features candid, practical conversations with industry leaders, offering strategies to scale your business while staying true to your mission. From branding and marketing to leadership, culture, and compliance, we cover the tools you need to balance care and commerce with confidence. MasterMined is brought to you by Snapshot, a digital agency on a mission to serve with heart, execute with excellence, and build something bigger together. And now, welcome to MasterMined.
Welcome to MasterMined, where we break down what's working right now in digital marketing. Today, we're covering what I like to call performance marketing checklist for 2025, covering everything from the easy wins to the things you really shouldn't ignore. We had some of our clients and friends in the community suggest some digital questions that we're going to break down today. What should your budget really look like? We've got benchmarks. Targeting your admissions data, critical. Trend watching without wasting spend, we'll talk about it. When to scale, how PMAX and Meta actually fit, and why you should never Google yourself. Seriously. It's riskier than you think. It's fast. It's tactical. Let's go. Welcome to the show, Lee, Jeff. Great to have you guys today. This is going to be a great episode. You guys are definitely some experts in this field, so I'm excited to kick this off.
Thank you, Mark.
Yep, great to be here.
Well, let's just break it down. What's one of the biggest misconceptions you guys see with treatment centers when they first try pay-per-click?
Well, you'd be surprised how many people don't even really know what that means, to be honest. So it's like when we talk about pay per click, what you're really talking about for the most part is Google advertising, right? And so it's like, it's amazing how little people even know what that term actually means. So then what we're talking about are Google ads. So what's the biggest misconception? The biggest misconception is that it costs a lot of money. And I think the budgeting aspect scares a lot of people off when it shouldn't necessarily scare people off, because it is a super effective tool. Because let's face it, I mean, that's where the majority of the consumers begin their search. Whether that's where they make the decision of who they're going to contact, that remains to be seen based upon the campaigns that you build. But there's no question that that's where people are beginning their search. What do you think, Lee?
Yeah, Jeff, I agree with those comments. I think for me, where I see the biggest disconnect is that when people decide that they want to try pay-per-click, they think that absolves them of any responsibility or input, that they're just going to hire somebody or an agency just to do it and they take care of it. And that's where most of the time when I come on and review, that's where the failure, it starts from the very beginning, that they absolve and they release that responsibility to somebody else. There is no easy button when it comes to PPC. You just don't stroke a check and all of a sudden the phone starts ringing.
Yeah. I mean, I think Lee's absolutely right. I mean, for a lot of owners, and this is completely understandable, what we're talking about feels like a black box to them. It feels like there's sort of there's this magic trick that if they just write a big enough check, then the magic trick will actually solve all of their problems. And again, it is just a tool. Like we've said on a lot of our episodes up until now, there are many tactics that you can utilize in terms of attracting people to your program. You need to have a comprehensive strategy and know how these things all fit together.
Yeah, well, let's break that down a little bit further and just talk about, like, what's one tactic that you see some of these centers miss or mess up when they're doing the digital marketing?
Specifically to
like just
Google advertising,
to pay-per-click, and Google ads.
Oh, okay. I think it starts off, I mean, frankly, with how well do you know your program and how well do you know who you want to attract? Because, I mean, it's one thing to go to an agency and say, I need a Google Ads campaign, and they may start super broad, or and the reality is you know your program and you know your clientele the best. So you need to start off with developing what keywords, and then even before you get to keywords, I mean, professionals and agencies can help you determine that. Determine what clientele you want to reach, and then you start to build out, the keyword universe that's going to attract that. And I'm sure Lee will agree with this, unless you want to go a different direction. But I think the idea is that my recommendation is almost always to start off small and then grow out. based upon success and what the data shows you, as opposed to what a lot of people like to do is start broad because it might generate more activity. That doesn't necessarily mean it's the right activity.
I think a lot of times agencies want you to go large because that's money in their pocket. Depending on how they're pricing, if they're doing a percentage of the spend, that's one of, I think, the key problems when people jump into PPC. There is no reason why you cannot start small and then grow into a larger spend. I would always recommend doing it that way. I think a lot of times when people will ask me, well, what keywords do I need to go after? And if you've got a third party who doesn't really understand your business telling you that, that's where you kind of get into this easy button trap and you will fail. I always recommend that people mine what they already have.
Yep.
They know the best types of calls and best types of keywords that their current admissions team and counselors are being successful with. Like, you can either record the calls and do the transcription and see what is working for you. You can interview your clinicians to see what they're comfortable. And that's where you want to start from. If you go in with this huge campaign trying to cover literally thousands of keywords, you're going to create noise in your admissions process, which will then funnel down into your milieu, right? Where you need to be very intentional and specific with the types of callers that you want to generate leads from.
And I mean, just to pick up on that, I mean, part of it is start asking yourself the question of, are we currently attracting the clientele that we want? And if we are, then let's build campaigns that actually amplify that. But if we actually need to seek a different type of clientele than we're currently doing, then Google Ads is a really good way to try some new markets and then see what's going to happen, because Google Ads is easier to pivot more effectively than maybe reorienting an entire business development team, for example.
And I think, and we'll get into the whole discussion of PMAX in a little while, but I think a lot of times you have to look as the business owner or the director of marketing or the CMO, you have to look at the exact keyword that was clicked or generated. And you would be surprised when you start seeing some of these keywords and phrases. And what you'll notice is a lot of times people are getting stuck with this broad match. And the reason that everybody, including Google, wants to go broad match is because they can now present your ad to a much larger audience. And when you get larger and larger, you start to get audiences that are not necessarily targeted.
Yeah.
Right? And you would be really surprised. One of my clients, when I was looking at their campaigns, I was noticing, I said, wow, you're getting a lot of people calling for heroin. Do you really treat a lot of heroin addicts in your program? Oh, no, we really rarely ever see them. Now, it's not a problem if that's if your program is set up to address that community. But why would you keep putting in people that are looking for heroin rehab when that's really not your sweet spot of your program? Because there are millions of other people that are in your sweet spot that you should be attracting, because now you create a situation where the caller's frustrated because they've reached a program that's not really set up to handle that. Your admissions team is complaining, well, why am I getting these types of calls that I can't hopefully convert? And there are ways to solve that.
Yeah.
It's not an unfixable problem.
Well, you guys have both kind of covered this a little bit, but let's go into a little more specific. We get this question all the time, and it's around like, what is a good, healthy budget for like a solo facility? And then like, let's even break it down like a multi-location facility. What do you guys recommend? I know everybody's going to have their own opinion on it. So, Lee, how about?
I have heard it all, Mark. I have heard people tell me, oh, I was speaking with so-and-so and they said I need to spend $100,000 a month. Oh, I was speaking with so-and-so and they said I need to spend $15,000, $5,000. Throw out, you make any number. I've heard it all.
Yeah.
And if somebody is giving you a number before actually doing the work in the investigation, then they cannot possibly know. And that's why Jeff and I are big advocates of starting small. So I have worked with clients, obviously, in my background working at foundations and in the Meadows, where we were big players in paid search. But we didn't start with a number. I talk about this in my book. We didn't just start spending hundreds of thousands of dollars a month. Like, we grew into that based on success. And that's why you can start with $1,000 and $1,500. And yeah, some agencies might say, well, I don't want to do that. Well, because they might not be able to support it. They're not making enough. But you can start there, and then you grow on the success. You build on the success. You don't start with thousands of keywords. You start with a handful. And then if you're doing okay, then you start to add to that. That's my personal opinion, how you can be small but yet be successful.
Yeah.
I mean, you can only build a successful campaign based upon what you know works. And so regardless of the number where you start, you get enough intelligent data that just says, even if you start with a tiny budget, if you know that certain keywords work and then your admissions team is able to convert well based upon that, then you go ahead and you start investing more into that area, and then you organically grow that up. The other thing that I think is risky is a lot of people may come in based with a budget number, or they might say, well, here's what your competitors are doing. And it's like, we know that this industry is full of FOMO, the fear of missing out. And so we know that, sometimes those numbers are inflated in terms of what are spending. Well, a good agency can give you an idea of what people are spending in your market, and then a good idea of the keywords that are being captured. And then we haven't even gotten into branded and non-branded really, at this point. And I see a lot of campaigns that unfortunately get directed more heavily towards a branded campaign as opposed to a non-branded campaign. It's like, in my opinion, it's like, you should look at this like an investment portfolio. You should look at this and say, what are we really trying to accomplish? And then how much is offense and how much is defense? And then, if you don't have somebody who's capable of discussing it in those terms, you might want to think about making a switch.
And, the time to launch PPC is not when you're having a census drop.
Right.
Because now you're going to rush in and make some very poor decisions. You need to be involved with it as part of your portfolio all along the way, so that as you are either thinking about growing or you are looking ahead and in 2 weeks or 30 days we're going to have a potential census decline, that's when you want to get into it, and you can expand from there versus having to set something up in a rush where you're going to make mistakes, and you're going to be you might be beholden to some of these players that come in with these, really exaggerated promises they can't fulfill.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, to Lee's point, he is so right in saying, and because we see this time and time again, where census dips, and then here's a program that maybe has not done much in terms of digital advertising, all of a sudden says, that's the answer. That's the direction that we need to go. And then they'll move into a campaign very quickly. They'll probably overinvest. They'll get really lackluster results, and then they will go ahead and say that tactic doesn't work for them. That it does, it's not effective for them, and therefore we wasted all this sort of money. When the reality of it is a very effective tactic, but it's not. But it's something that you need to work into, not expect massive returns in a short period of time, and then all of a sudden you can scale that back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love the start small, test it out. And you've got to be very active on this and on these campaigns to see what's working, what's not. I know that sometimes when we step in, we see the set it and forget it mentality of, hey, we're spending $5,000 and it's just the campaign's been running for 6 months with no changes on it, or no evolution to this campaign or targeting, and they're just throwing money away. I know you guys see it as well.
There's so many clues, and that's a great example, Mark. How often are you touching your negative keyword? Mm-hmm. So many times I'll come in and they'll be like, oh, well, we set up the negative keyword 6 months ago, and you haven't added one negative keyword in 6 months. Like that's a signal that there is a program that's not really being tended to. Yeah. And if you don't tend it, it becomes like a garden. It'll be full of weeds.
The other really, I'm going to say simple, low-hanging fruit situation is the call tracking, or the call rail or call tracking metrics, or Invoca, or whatever system that you're using. It is built to feed information back to your Google ad campaign. So one of the easiest things to do that I see a lot of people overlooking is developing a consistent measurement tool in terms of what is a quality call and what is not a quality call. And then even attaching a dollar value associated to each of those levels. That information gets fed back to Google that says this particular call and the metadata associated with this particular call and these keywords and all the things that generated that call, Google is going to try to generate more of that for you. Mm-hmm. And so even, I'm shocked at how many people don't have that feedback loop built into their system, and it's not difficult to set up.
Yeah. Well, you guys have talked about the importance of like data and the importance of knowing what keywords we're out there bidding on. And I guess with a small center that doesn't have a lot of like data already, like how do they make smart marketing decisions in this area?
Well, Jeff, I'll speak first to that. I mean, I think they cannot abdicate responsibility. They have to dig in. And it doesn't mean that they're necessarily personally running the campaigns, but they have to spend they have to dedicate some personal time or somebody on their team to really starting to understand. There are so many centers that just set it and forget it. They just look at a vanity metric report and they wonder why. They have to find somebody on their team and their marketing team or them personally to really start to understand. And some of it is like listening to a podcast like this where they get some ideas and start asking questions. Because one of the things that I was on a call yesterday and we were talking about conversion. And I think my client was unclear about what that means. And so I broke it down for them that, okay, the agency is telling you conversion, but is that on a phone call or a web form?
Right.
And we realized, like 70% of these conversions were web forms. We know that web forms convert at a very poor rate. It's not that you don't want to do it, but if you're optimizing your entire PPC campaign on web forms, which is what was happening, you're going to continue to get very poor results.
Although it does make your agency look very good.
And that's what they were reporting, these really high conversion rates, but they were saying, why are we not getting admissions?
Yeah.
And it was kind of it's a situation where now my client understands and they can be empowered to kind of help direct that. And I would say from the agency perspective, the agency doesn't understand the business. They don't understand that the web forms are not converting. Because maybe in other industries they do convert better. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to behavioral health with the relationship part of this, that's where they were losing. When you're on the phone, you've got a much better opportunity. It doesn't mean you don't do web forms, but you have to know that they're weighted differently.
Yeah. To Lee's point, and I completely agree with this. If you're going to make a commitment to digital marketing, you're going to make a commitment to doing some additional things to generate leads to your operation. The owner or the C-level person who's responsible for this needs to go ahead and decide who in their organization is going to remain curious about this, who in their organization is going to be responsible for managing this agency relationship. And you also need to look at it in terms of your agency partner or whoever you're working with, like Lee or myself. Do they have the patience and the knowledge to teach me? Do they have the patience and the knowledge and the ability to bring me along so that they don't just make a recommendation and I say rubber stamp, yep, that's what we're going to do. They really want to explain why we're doing certain things and then sort of be carried along. That's what I find to be the most effective relationships, and that's what I find to be the most effective in terms of generating campaigns that return the results you're looking for.
Yeah, this is a great conversation, and I would encourage the viewers to put in a question in the comments section. If you have any questions for the group, we'd love to answer them for you. Just throw them in the comments section, and we'll answer all those for you. But going back to like Lee, you said FOMO in this industry, and I guess like, how do you look at like what trends are out there and what should I target without like blowing the whole budget?
Well, I think Jeff said FOMO. I always love when Jeff brings that acronym up. I think for me, I always try to focus my clients on what they call long tail. I am trying to, I'm not going after the big herd mentality of, as an example in our space, alcohol rehab and drug rehab. Those are very expensive keyword terms. They're also very high up on the funnel. I am really looking for a more discerning type client who is on search, and I want that they're knowledgeable. So I want somebody that actually has done a little research so that when they get on the call with our highly trained admissions team, it's a real good match, right? And we're not having to start going over a lot of things at this top of the funnel. Like they're much more informed and we can really get down to some of the more meaty conversation points, which will help with conversion. That takes effort and it takes energy, but it can be done. And when you think about paid search today, You can find people that are younger, that are maybe just out of school, just done their certifications through Google. They can really help you. You're going to help. They're going to be on site with you, helping learn your models of treatment. They're going to be with you every day. But what they're going to provide to you is this expert knowledge. And I think that a lot of times people are worried they can't afford somebody, they can't find somebody. And it's not easy hiring, just like it's not easy hiring clinical staff. But a lot of these technologies are pretty new. You don't need to hire a 20 or 25 year PPC veteran, because the technology today is a lot different than it was when Jeff and I first got into it. And so I think Jeff said the word curious. I think you can find the right kind of person that is young and hungry, and they're going to provide to you some of that expert knowledge, because it doesn't take 5 years to be an expert anymore. And you're going to then connect them to the behavioral health, and they're going to be there on site learning, and that's going to help you start mining. And I love the name of our podcast, MasterMined. That's what each of these listeners have to do for their treatment centers. They have to mine to get those kind of long tail keywords that are going to be appropriate for them.
I want to jump off that for just a second, because I agree with everything that Lee said. What I'll add is that no one gets in this industry because they want to be a digital marketing expert. It's like digital marketing is essential in terms of making your operation be successful. But that's why it's so important that, we're steeped in it. And it's like, and we love it, and we're steeped in it, and we're paying attention to all the trends and all the things that are changing all the time. Most people who are making these decisions are not. So it's like, who are you going to? So I agree with finding someone who's youngish, who is going to know what's going on in terms of like Google and AI and stuff like that. Yes. But you also need the person that can steer. You also need the person that can translate. You also need the person that can help you make sense of what it is that's going on, because this is not this is not why you got into business, right? The other thing that I want to point out, and this is sort of shifting gears a little bit, is this connection between Google Ads and then your organic SEO. Because what we also know is that the way that search engine results are being presented on the page now, it's changing all the time. And so it's one thing to say that we have a really robust ad campaign, and we just assume that people are going to click on that ad and then they're going to follow our landing page into our call funnel. What I'm seeing happen more often than not, and there's studies that show this, people will see an ad and they are smart enough to know, they're like, okay, I'm actually going to then open another browser tab, and I'm going to type the name of that treatment center, and I'm going to look at their website, so that they may get tipped with an ad, but people are going to then go and then directly Google, or they're going to search for that program. And so your website and your organic presence, it's like, it is critical that be just as robust as any sort of an ad campaign. And this is an area where I see a lot of people drop the ball.
Yeah, I have a whole chapter in my book where I get into that, because what happens is you're going to have the pressures, whether you're an owner founder or whether you have private equity, where people are wanting to chase the lowest cost per admit, and they're missing out on how that it's an ecosystem.
Right.
And so paid search can have some uplift for SEO and vice versa, social too. So what ends up happening, if you're just chasing that lower CPA, and this is a technique called hammer and anvil that I talk about, but if you're always chasing the hammers, right, then all of a sudden you wake up one day and go, what happened? Well, you lost your anvil, right? And so that could be SEO, PPC, social media. And so that's where it's really important to have an overall understanding of your, in an example, cost per admit, or your marketing spend. And you want to be careful not to all of a sudden cut away something you think is not helping you, or it's a little more expensive, when maybe that was what was helping this other piece be successful.
We have to be really careful about being so granular about how we measure these things without recognizing how they all influence the other.
Yeah.
And that's where you were alluding earlier, Jeff, about the branded versus non-branded, and that's where most of my smaller clients, when they want to start dipping their toe into paid search, I always recommend, let's start with branding, right? And that's where somebody might be Googling your specific center name, and you want to show an ad, because now what should happen is your SEO should show up. But what we know in this space is that we have a lot of bad players that are bidding on our branded names. And whether they include those in the ad copy or not, it's another topic that we'll get into, I'm sure, today. But that's a good way to kind of dip your toe into maybe 4 or 5 keywords. Maybe you have your founder, in there, and kind of measure that, and you spend, a few $100,000 a month. But that also is going to help you.
By the way, that was a few hundred or thousand, not a few $100,000.
No, a few $100. You're right. I'm sorry. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Like it's not a big spend.
Yeah.
And that's a good way for you to kind of get your campaign set up, make sure you're legit script certified, go through that process so that later on when you want to spend more or branch out into the non-branded, you're not starting from scratch. Right, it's a good way to kind of just ease your way into it.
Yeah, I think we all agree that start small, test out, see what's working. So like, where do you go when you see like a telltale sign that it's working and it's time to scale the digital budget around this?
Well, I think you need to establish what your conversion metrics need to be. And once you're clear about what your conversion metrics and how efficiently your admissions team is converting the ads the ads and the inbound calls that you have, once you hit those performance standards, then it becomes almost a math equation at that point. And that's where you want to be, right? Is like there's sort of this 3-legged race in terms of spend and conversion percentage, and then it's like maybe conversion percentage catches up, and then you do a little bit more spend, and then conversion percentage. I mean, that's ideally what you want. But if you start spending and your conversion percentage is going down, you need to tap the brakes. You need to tap the brakes, and you need to take a deeper dive in terms of what's happening. Is this happening on the admission side, or is this happening more on our ad campaign is a little bit out of whack?
Yeah, Jeff, let's stay with you on this one. I know you both have differing opinions on like PMAX. So
they may
PMAX
not differ that much. But
is it friend or foe? Like, how much control are these centers really giving up?
Okay, so I'm gonna give sort of a good news, bad news. Okay, so the good news is Google has created basically an automated system called performance maximization, and then we're shortening it to PMAX. And if you think about it, it's like the best way to think about this is when you open a new piece of software, is basically it's like it'll have a wizard that comes up and says, "Would you like me to set the default settings for you?" And then most people say yes, 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 yes. And then all of a sudden, a piece of software is working at about 80, 90%, efficacy. All right. If you're opening a hot dog stand, or if you're opening up a food truck, I'm just sticking with food because I'm hungry at the moment. But if you're opening, PMAX is probably very effective for you. It's like Google is built to actually get you to 80, 90% efficacy. And Google also has salespeople. Shock. Google has salespeople that are calling businesses all around the country and saying, "Hey, I'm with Google. Would you like me to help you optimize your campaign?" And they are incentivized to set you up on this Performance Max campaign. Okay, so long story to get to the point. The good news is Google has made this more approachable to a lot of businesses by creating sort of an automated flow. Okay, here's the bad news. The bad news is our industry is so competitive. Our industry is so specific. Our industry is so complex. PMAX is not an effective way to begin your campaign. So if you're a program owner and then you get that phone call from Google that says, "Hey, would you like us to help you set up or automate your Google Ads campaign?" And then you haven't made a decision about an agency partner or working with Lee or working with me or somebody like that, a lot of people say yes. That more often than not opens an entire tale of woe because it is not going to be effective in our industry. It just isn't. Now, I will say that once you have been advertising with Google with an effective campaign that Lee or I might have built or that Snapshot might have built out, PMAX is an effective layer to then learn from what you've already built. And it uses its own machine learning to take a look at your campaigns and then make some optimization recommendations. So it could be like an additive layer to an already effective campaign. So let me stop there because I covered a lot of territory.
Yeah, and I agree with what Jeff is saying. I think the reality is that if you're a center like Foundations, where we had hundreds of beds in multiple states, multiple levels of care. PMAX, and PMAX wasn't around,
No.
back in the founding, but that could help our strategy, because we could take pretty much everything, right? Even Medicaid calls that we didn't help, we had referral partners. I mean, we could pretty much take everything. But when you're a smaller program and you set up on PMAX, and all of a sudden you're wondering, why am I getting Medicaid calls, or why am I getting calls from Utah and I'm in Tennessee, or why am I getting sober living calls? That's where Google, they kind of look at that as all behavioral health, and they don't understand the complexities and how that we have a spend. So if I've spent $50 and all of a sudden I'm getting a call from somebody looking for an AA meeting or sober living, and I don't do that, like that's a real, it's a real problem for our admissions team, because they're small staff, and that 5 or 10 minutes on the phone, it creates a real problem.
See, but Google thinks that's a good call.
Google will think that's a good call. So PMAX can work if you have a program where it's getting the good feedback, like the conversion data is coming right back, and it's all connected to your CRM, or your EHR and your call center, CTM or CallRail. Like the ones that are all connected and that data flow is coming back, that can help.
Yeah.
But for most,
I see it as an additive layer.
Yes. Yeah. If you're and you mentioned that if you're starting with PMAX, it can be a real issue. And what will happen is the agency and Google will say, hey, we turned PMAX on, and wow, your conversion rate jumped up, and we generated all these phone calls for you. And they've totally missed out on the quality that we're missing, and also the pressure that you've now put on the admissions team. And now that's where we start seeing admissions teams where they're not aligned with your marketing, because they're like, you're sending me all this stuff that's not very good.
Yeah, the other thing to point out when you're looking at PMAX and when you're looking at the performance of your overall campaign, those PMAX calls are generally cheaper calls, and it's like and so you do kind of get what you pay for. It's like it may generate higher volume. It will likely be lower quality, and they are also cheaper. So a lot of people may look at this and say, "Oh wow, okay, I can get 2x the calls because they're cheaper." And if you don't have that sort of virtuous feedback loop that we've been talking about, it's going to continue to feed you stuff that you don't want.
I get calls all the time, and the CEO or the founder will say, "Lee, we need more calls." And my first response is, why do you need more calls? Because I want to actually produce less calls. So instead of getting you 1,000 calls just to get calls, how about I get you the one call that converted? Like that should be. We have kind of the idea is kind of backwards in my mind. Like I actually want less calls. I just want them more qualified.
Yeah.
Well, because what does more calls mean? More calls means more staff. Because you have to be able to answer those calls. So. Do you really want the more calls? I mean, really, it's like, are you prepared to add that many more admissions people?
Yeah, you really want more quality calls, more quality form fills, more quality in everything you're doing in the space. And
there's a reason why the numbers haven't changed over the years. We still have 20-something million Americans that need help, and only about 3 million a year get it. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy, because I would argue that probably some big percentage of those 18 to 19 million people that fail to get treatment is because they've gotten stuck in these kind of loops where they're responding to an ad or they're calling a center that can't really help them, and they get frustrated, after they've called 2 or 3 places and they've gotten shipped around. I would say that is probably more of what is so concerning about our space, is that we're in this rush to appeal to everybody and promote. And I just listened to a podcast from our friend Shane Raymer. I'll give a shout out to the sober guy, but he was talking with Andrew and Luke at Eagle Ranch, and they brought up a really smart point, which comes, I think, out of the big book. It's attraction, not promotion. And that is, if you think about it, if you're running a program, and probably most people listen and go, yeah, that's it, Lee. Yeah. That's what we're about clinically. Well, why wouldn't we apply that to our digital marketing too? And if you're about attraction, not promotion, you should be repulsed when somebody says, oh yeah, spend $100,000 a month on PPC or $15,000 a month without doing the research,
Yeah.
I completely agree with that. And it's like, the term that I've used come more from sort of a media background is, are you a magnet or are you a megaphone? Same type of thing. It's like, am I putting, a force field out there that's attracting what I want? Am I communicating in a way that's pulling people in, or am I pushing a message out and I'm just showering people with words? And we know, I mean, it's just human nature to attraction is way more effective.
Yeah. Do you all see, like, in this space, Meta being really still relevant in the behavioral health space, or is it just getting too noisy out there?
Yeah, I haven't personally seen it where I could assure an owner that they could spend X dollars in Meta and see the conversion result that we would hope for them. But with that being said, I do believe that social and we'll talk about Meta, but also LinkedIn is one of the ones I like too. I believe that there is a fundamental benefit when it comes to alumni engagement, which alumni should be at least your third largest referral source. Mm-hmm. And then in the example of LinkedIn, that should be a really helpful business development lift from the relationships is dealing with referrals. So I think it's when I have these conversations, I'm trying to set their expectation. This is not the easy button. You're not going to go start running ads on TikTok or Instagram Reels and all of a sudden see a meaningful lift in quality phone calls or quality conversions.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with Lee. I mean, I largely think that social media, with the exception of LinkedIn, social media can either shine or tarnish your halo. You know, it can effectively promote what you're doing, or if you do it poorly, you know, it can come back at you. But I generally don't find social media that's more consumer oriented to generate phone calls or to generate inbound leads. It's more about an amplifier for what you're already doing. LinkedIn can definitely be effective on the business development side. And then, I mean, to Lee's point, if you think about alumni, I mean, that's a direct to consumer a tactic. So, I mean, it makes a lot of sense to have an engaged community in that regard. But the traffic that you're going to get from Meta in general is going to be pretty top of the funnel. And then we want to try to get people closer to a decision point if you're really thinking about generating leads or phone calls.
We're getting ready to do an interesting test with one of my clients on YouTube. And I think it's going to be fascinating to see what the results are because, you know, with YouTube, we're getting some really good video created. So they're already doing this, not worrying about the promotion side of it. They're doing it, investing for SEO and also for connecting with professionals and people that are kind of their call center now can say, hey, go watch this video about our program. So, but we're going to do some advertising. That's going to be interesting to see where YouTube and their advertising, because it's connected, you know, obviously owned by Google. That will be interesting. I hope I can report back in the coming months on kind of what we're seeing there. But again, it gets back to this fundamental issue. You need to be spending some budget, not a huge part, but experimenting, learning, kind of getting that set up. So we're going to just put a few $100s. We're not breaking the budget on this, but we're going to really get some really good data so that when the time comes and if we had the opportunity to grow that particular business, we might say, hey, let's dial that up.
Yeah.
Right. Or, hey, we've been watching it. It's not really working for us, and we can dial it back down. But you don't want to all of a sudden just rush in or hear the FOMO. Hey, I heard the center down the street here is doing YouTube advertising. Let's move all the chips there.
Now, YouTube is a different sort of animal if you think about it, because, I mean, Mark specifically asked about Meta.
Right.
Right. YouTube is, in my mind, I mean, it's like, I think YouTube is really critical in terms of SEO and generating authority. And it's like, but then in terms of promoting what you've done on YouTube, that's where something like Meta or TikTok or whatever could be super interesting. So I think for the benefit of our listeners, I think we need to recognize that we're really not putting YouTube into a social media bucket necessarily. We're talking about developing, you know, quality, authoritative, SEO relevant content on YouTube, but then promoting it on social media. So that being the case, I mean, I'd be fascinated to see how that plays out too.
It'll be interesting to bring back that data and see what you're finding. But it is all about testing. But let's step into a really fun question. So we all get this from executive teams, and it's what can I do if somebody is bidding on my brand name out there?
Yeah, I love when we were prepping before this question, because this was something that we were fighting at Foundations many years ago, and so we created a cease and desist letter, and had our legal team sending out stuff, and I think it was pretty effective, but I think that's kind of fallen by the wayside. And, because everybody thought Legit Script was going to fix this, it's going to solve the problem, and it has not. So I think we have, two things that we need to understand. One, people can put your brand name in for their bidding. And I've had some clients that will pick up the phone and call centers like, why are you bidding on my name? I think that's a personal relationship thing, and it's something that I think is very appropriate when you see that. But the first thing is you've got to be monitoring it. You've got to have somebody that's kind of monitoring it. I always try to wrap that into kind of our reputation management side, the people that are kind of monitoring that. I want them also checking for that. The second part is there's a lot of bad players out there that are using copyrighted trademark branded names in their ad copy. And that is illegal. And so the question then is, well, how do I, and there's a process through which you can report that. And there's even tools now where you can subscribe and it automates that.
So, I mean, to just put this into a bumper sticker, if you will, I think when it comes to this topic, and it's a buzzy and it's a hot topic, and it should be, but I think everyone out there needs to be educated on the difference between what is awful and what is lawful. And there's a really robust conversation around what that is, because to that point, it's like, it is awful to see someone bidding on your name, and you could pick up the phone and call them, and it's like shame on you. It's like, I'm really mad at you. I'm really angry at you. That does not mean that they've crossed a line. Now, there are some things that they could do that absolutely do cross a line, and there are now a couple of lawsuits with the FTC specifically on this topic. So it's important for everyone to become educated on the difference between what falls into the bucket of awful, what falls into the bucket of lawful or unlawful, and then have an enforcement mechanism and decide what you're going to do when people are on either side of that fence. And it's important that you have that strategy in mind, and then when it happens to you, you actually engage that playbook.
And I think for the folks that are listening, they need to be doing screenshots when this happens.
Right.
Like, it's not enough to say this happened, but I have no proof. So you can take screenshots and store it. And I think for a lot of my clients, I recommend they also reach out to their members of Congress and the members of Senate.
Yep.
Because I think there's a whole conversation. We hear it all the time about
if it falls into the unlawful.
On the unlawful, absolutely.
But don't waste somebody's time on the awful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think at some point there is some interest from the agencies and from our leaders in Congress to figure out how we solve this, because I believe the search engines ultimately can solve this. It's just a question of getting their attention. And so I think documenting it, sending out the cease and desist letters when appropriate, and writing and calling these centers. Because sometimes I found the centers didn't even know what the agency was doing.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so once they were kind of alerted, they were like, oh, I'm so sorry. So we have to also approach that maybe in the beginning, maybe they don't know, what's happening.
Well, I just want to go back. That comes back to, are you working with somebody who is going to be patient and teach you? Are you working with somebody that is knowledgeable enough that they can explain it to you in a way that you feel informed, and you don't, because again, we're in this space and we love this space. People that we work with are at varying levels of education about this space. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to coming up with the strategy and then knowing what lawful and awful and all that sort of stuff is like, are you working with somebody that is working, is on the right side of the fence and also willing to teach you? Yeah. So that's another question that you need to be asking.
Well, let's put a bow on this episode with another last fun question that we always get. Why should I not Google myself? And then how does that screw up the campaigns that I'm running? Maybe Lee, you want to start off with this one?
Yeah, it's almost a daily conversation when people are reaching out to me. I Google myself today and this and that. And so, listen, the reality is in the algorithm, there are so many inputs, right, that are coming in. It's time of day, your IP provider, it's the term you're searching. Is anybody bidding, not bidding
your
during
location.
That moment? You're looking, and so all these things go into. So Jeff and I, we could be Googling the exact same thing right now, but because he has a different provider on his cell phone than I do, I'm going to get different results.
And my VPN is set for Stockholm.
There you go.
Yeah.
I use this example all the time because, and this is not to promote Starlink, but I live out in the country. Here in Nashville, I'm out in Franklin. And we don't have fiber. So I'm on Starlink. my IP is Atlanta, Georgia.
Right.
So when I'm searching something from my home, I'm getting Atlanta, Georgia results first. It's really fascinating. And a lot of times people don't realize that. So when you Google yourself, you're going to get very specific just for you, not for what everybody else is getting. So it's better to actually use and have an agency or somebody on your team that's going to pull reports,
Right.
that's going to show you the entirety of the search landscape, not just you from your home or your laptop or your cell phone. You're going to get incorrect data. And then what happens is the CEO or the founder, they come in the office and they start raising hell. Like, I just Googled myself and I've got all, and it's like, and everybody's like panicked, and you will then all of a sudden cause them to start switching maybe
Right.
what they're working on SEO or PPC wise, and it could tank what you're doing.
Right.
So-
and now you may have optimized a campaign to where the CEO lives.
Yeah.
And so part of, I mean, I love this topic because, believe it or not, excuse me, Google is doing its best to actually be super responsive to your query. Google doesn't really know that you're the CEO of a program. It doesn't really know. I mean, as far as it knows, you're someone who's looking for help. And so it's really trying to be responsive to all of those variables that, it's like, am I using mobile? Am I using it's all of these things that Lee talked about. And then the other conversation that continually comes up is, people, they Google, and it's like they don't know why they're not number one for everything that they search for. It's just like, well, if you were doing a good job, I would come up at the top of the page on no matter what I search for. It could just be like a completely random thing. And that's, again, speak to your agency, speak to Lee, speak to me about why campaigns are built the way they are, because it's like you may or may not want to be. Or it's like, might not want to invest what's required to be at the top of that page. So there's a lot that goes into it.
Well, Jeff, Lee, thank you both for bringing it today. Great conversation, way to break down digital in a way that I think is pretty understandable for most people. And if you have any questions out there, again, please let us know. But you guys did a great job.
And I'm
today.
glad Jeff didn't collapse from hunger. So
I'm going to go find a food truck. I'm going to be Googling
we got to
food
get
truck
Craig
right
to
now.
start bringing Nutri-Grain bars in the episodes.
And thank you for listening today. We would love for people to submit their questions for another episode breaking down the digital landscape. We also encourage anyone with a specific question to reach out in the comments. We'd love to do a live case study with you in a future episode. Thanks again for joining MasterMined.
That wraps up this episode of MasterMined. Thank you so much for joining us. And remember, MasterMined is not just a podcast, it's a community. So don't forget to comment, subscribe, and review us. Your feedback helps us continue to bring you content that's relevant and relatable. Thanks again to our sponsor, Snapshot, a digital media marketing agency. And thank you for joining us on MasterMined, your behavioral health playbook.